Hi, everybody. Welcome to Frugal Tech Live. It's Tech and Tuesday, and we've got a great guest for you, Mr. Brett Twiggs from StorageCraft, the makers of ShadowProtect Desktop server and desktop editions as well. We look forward to having you on the show. Stick around. We're going to have a great time. We'll be right back. And we're back. Thanks, everybody, for stopping by. We're going to go ahead and we want to remind everybody, if you're watching on Justin.tv, come over to live.frugalbrothers.com. That is where the chat room that we moderate is located. And let's go ahead and bring our guest on, Mr. Brett Twigg. He is with StorageCraft. StorageCraft, hang on. This is just, we're really having a bad show here. We'll make it better. We introduce to you StorageCraft. StorageCraft Corporation is a premier software company focused on helping back up fast and recover faster. They make the ShadowProtect Desktop, ShadowProtect Server editions, basically making your life easier when it comes to recovery, system migration, and data protection. And with us today is Mr. Brett Twiggs. Brett's been an IT pro for 20 years. He's been working he worked as a consultant for large companies, including Disney. So I guess he was an Imagineer. Anyhow, he is currently the Senior Sales Engineer for StorageCraft Technologies. And let's go ahead and bring on Brett. There we go. Hey, Brett, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you great. How are you doing, Bruce?
Oh, doing outstanding. We're off to a bit of a rough start today, but it's kind of the way it goes. Brett, thanks a lot for coming on today's program, and we really appreciate you taking time out of your day.
Oh, my pleasure.
Brett, let's get right to it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the history of StorageCraft and maybe a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Let me start off with myself. As you mentioned, I've been in the industry for about 20 years. Started off with Novell. Worked in contracting for about 12 years for large companies, multinational companies. Also worked as a systems analyst, kind of a systems architect for the Walt Disney Studios. So got very familiar with backup and recovery working for the Walt Disney Studios. And have since worked for Landesk Software and now currently with StorageCraft. And so it's great to be here. StorageCraft, is a little background, has been around since 1999. Really started off making snapshot drivers. Those drivers were actually OEM'd by companies and still are to some extent, EMC, VMware, Symantec. But back in the early days, they saw that there's a lot of companies doing backup, but not a lot that really focus on the restore side. I mean, a backup's great. Everybody needs to get a backup, but I kind of equate it to a spare tire. Everybody's got one in their trunk, but is it going to work when you really need it? And so that's where they really built a product and focused on recovery. And that's kind of where we're at today with the ShadowProtect Desktop and ShadowProtect Server. Great recovery tool.
So you worked for Disney. Does that make you an Imagineer at one time or another? I'm just kidding.
No, the Imagineers were actually the smarter guys.
They were. Oh,
they were building all those rides and audio animatronics. So.
well, StorageCraft, when did they actually get going? When did they? They're not a real old company, but they've had a lot of experience before they formed StorageCraft, didn't they?
Right. Yeah, it really was around just not that many years ago, 2004, when they really kind of started with their products and kicked those off. And in the last couple of years, we've really seen some exciting growth.
Because I know that StorageCraft has been a really exciting company as far as, it's kind of like just like a rocket, out of almost nowhere. And everybody says you've got to look at their products and what they're doing over there. Let me ask you this. Let's get right to the meat and potatoes of things. You're best known for ShadowProtect Desktop and ShadowProtect Server editions, right?
Correct.
That's kind of one of the
that's
main,
kind of our bread and butter.
Bread and butter. So let's get into a discussion. just exactly what they do and how they work.
Okay. Just a little background. It's kind of interesting. We focused really on ShadowProtect Server, PC Magazine, and some testing. Picked up our desktop product, which we had, but that's not where our focus really was. But we started winning awards on the desktop edition, and so we've kind of got into the desktop arena a little bit more than we expected. But that's great. We're excited about that. The server and desktop editions really are a great way to do backups. We leverage Microsoft's VSS technology, so that volume shadow copy service really enables us to take great, clean, solid snapshots of databases like Exchange and SQL. And so that's where we can go in and not just take good backups, but we've got some additional things in there too, like hardware independent restore. So we can allow people with our server product, for example, to be on one manufacturer, switch boxes, go to another manufacturer. I mean, if their system goes down and they need to just grab another box, they can do a restore on dissimilar hardware very quick and easily. And so that's just a great feature. I mean, whether it's virtual to physical, physical to virtual, or between two different physical boxes, that's kind of one of our key technologies, is that hardware independent restore. One of the other things that we've got that really nobody else has when it comes to our ShadowProtect Server Edition, and it also works with desktop, but when you think of a server, we've got a piece called Virtual Boot. And Virtual Boot allows me to go back to any point in time. I could pick 2 o'clock yesterday, right-click on that where I'm saving that image out to another server, and I could say Virtual Boot and bring that up in a VM machine and restore that in just a matter of minutes. We make a connector back to those images, and it allows somebody to say, hey, our database just went down. It's, like right now, it's just in the afternoon. We need to kind of keep up and running through the rest of the day until we can get another box stood back up and kind of get this thing restored. And Virtual Boot does that. You can get a box back up, kind of recovered or at least up and running in a VM for a matter of hours while you're going ahead and kind of building that permanent physical machine. So some great technologies that really make it easy.
I think the first time that I seen the first demonstration I seen of it was ShadowProtect Server. We took and virtualized small business server, and then restored that server to a totally different iron, and we're talking, I think it was bare metal, pretty much, and it was truly an amazing thing to see. Oh, I know, it was restored to a laptop, and that was like the most amazing thing I've ever seen, at the time, and I'm going, holy moly! Now, albeit, big difference between running on a dedicated server box and a virtual machine, a laptop, but it was a pretty doggone amazing thing to see.
Yeah, in the old days, you used to have to grab a tape and try and restore that back, and that tape had all your drivers in it. And so putting that back down on dissimilar hardware, any type, was just going to be a mess trying to get everything up and running. And, hopefully you had a video driver that at least kind of come up. But now with the dissimilar hardware and our hardware independent restore, you can just move around quite easily. People will back up a VM, decide they maybe need to put that on a physical machine for more power and a few more resources, and they can easily move that over. In fact, that's what happens during our virtual boot technology. Is we right click on one of those images, open up Sun's virtual box, since that's an open source VM, and then we'll go ahead and build that VM, make a connection back to the images, and we're back up and running. But as part of that process, it's actually, you've pulled that off a physical box. Let's say it was a physical Dell machine, and you're now restoring back into a VM. And so the hardware independent restore basically puts down all the drivers needed for the platform that you're restoring onto.
And that's included then, the drivers are located on disk, or where are those drivers located from?
Well, that's both. We come up in a Windows, when we go to do recovery, we come up in the Windows PE environment. We give the option for Windows 2003 or Windows 2008. And then we'll load all the drivers that we can see for that platform that you're coming up on.
Okay.
But we also have another little piece in the recovery environment where you can load your own drivers. So if you have a third-party RAID driver that's really not going to be found out there, you can go ahead and load that manually.
Wow. Okay. All right. So... one of the things now, you guys also, if let's say I come in the morning and I have I have a drive failure. Okay, that's not a non-typical. I mean, that's not an untypical type thing to happen. Can I rescue my machine by using, say, Desktop Edition? If I've got a laptop or desktop, or can I rescue that machine with the Server Edition?
What do you mean by rescue? You mean as far as the machine's not coming up at all?
Right. It's not booting. It's not booting. We've got a hard drive issue. Can I possibly use those tools in order to get that machine back up and going?
Yeah, in some cases you can. A really good example is you come in on a Monday morning, you've got a server that's down, and maybe the motherboard just went out. The disks are good, the data's good.
Right.
So what you could actually do is swap that motherboard out and then come up in our recovery environment and let hardware independent restore make sure we're laying down the right drivers, chipset drivers and that for that new motherboard, and then go ahead and come back up on the existing disks.
As I understand it, one of the things that you do when you're doing, say, a backup, let's say we're going to move maybe from a physical server. We want to move everything from one physical server to another.
Okay.
Let's say we want to. That's our objective. And as you say, we're hardware independent at this point, so we can do that. So the way this works, isn't it that you're doing like you're backing up, or you're basically taking an image of that drive on a block level or a bit level?
Yes, correct. We are actually doing sector-based backups. And so one of the advantages to that is over time, we actually end up getting less data than if you're doing file-based backups. We'll actually do snapshots, since, as I mentioned, we're using the Microsoft VSS technology for databases, some of those harder things like databases that are always open for Exchange or SQL. We're leveraging VSS. And so that allows us to go and actually take snapshots even up to every 15 minutes. And so we're doing that on a sector level, and we'll actually watch any sectors that change, keep those in memory, and when it comes time to do another snapshot, we know the sectors we need to go pick up, and we don't actually have to read across the disk and take more I/O to do that.
Now, if I've got, let's say, an Exchange server, or I'm running a SQL server, will I have to pay additional in order to back up the SQL server or the Exchange server, or is this kind of all included in the way that the backup software works?
That's a great question. It's actually all included. We've tried to make it really simple, so we've kind of got 3 platforms that we look at.
Okay.
We license based on whether it's a desktop, a small business server, or a server. And then if you're buying the server license, then everything's included in that. So the VSS agent for Exchange, the VSS agent for SQL, those are all included. Everything's included in that price. So we try to make it simple. It's pretty much per node, per OS.
Per node, per OS. So talk to me about how the magic. Let's talk about the functionality of the desktop edition, because I know a lot of people are buying that product. So let's talk about the functionality of it a little bit. What do you think the biggest driver feature-wise for people should be looking at and making that product or taking it into consideration?
Actually, the neat thing is our server product and our desktop product have the same console and the same functionality, so there's really no difference between the 2 products. Desktop edition, for example, if I'm a small user out there, small office, there's some great features. I mentioned the hardware independent restore, because a lot of times by the time your system dies, you may want to get a new box, and it makes it really easy to bring that back. Virtual boot is also available for the desktop edition. And one of the things that can be handy for too, especially with servers, is you can use virtual boot for testing. So you could actually right-click, bring up in a VM, and you've got your server if the other one's down, but you can also, that's an added environment, and you can use that for testing. But for a desktop, you've also got a couple other things. When we right-click on those images that we backed up, you've got a quick mount. So you could actually right-click on a point in time, like say yesterday at 2 o'clock, say quick mount. That comes up in Windows Explorer, and now you can look through that just like it was yesterday at 2 o'clock in your Windows Explorer and find a file that maybe you accidentally deleted, and then just drag that back out onto the desktop.
That's pretty cool.
It's really neat. One of the things I just had
really
happen
awesome.
last week was a guy called, and we were talking. He actually had a drive that failed, and it had been going out for a while, so a lot of the data in his backup image was kind of corrupt. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that we did is I had him right-click on that, and instead of doing a quick mount, I had him do the mount option, and it walks through a little wizard, and you can actually mount that to a folder as an NTFS volume. You can mount that as a drive letter, and you can also make that writable. And so we checked that little box and mounted that to a drive letter, made it writable, and then he could go ahead. He now had a drive letter. He could run check disk across it, and then go ahead and fix up any errors in that image, save it as a new image, and now he had a new image that check disk had been ran on, and he could restore from that.
Wow, okay. With the desktop edition, again, to be clear, designed for home users, right? Or I could use it on my clients on my network, for example. I can license it for that. I think one of the beauties, you could run this application. Let's say that I have guests or somebody using a workstation or whatever, and they do some stuff on there they shouldn't do. I could easily roll back that system using the snapshot feature of ShadowProtect Desktop to another time, correct? And
correct.
Be good to go.
Yeah, you can actually, from a forensic standpoint, if you wanted to see what that machine looked like, a couple weeks ago on a certain day, or if you still had the granularity and you hadn't gotten rid of that for file space reasons, you could roll back to a certain point in time and, virtual boot, bring that box up as it was at that point in time, and then go ahead and look through it, or actually pull a forensic image if you needed to.
But I could virtual boot it, and that's in VirtualBox. It's going to come up as a VM in VirtualBox is how that operates. Is that correct?
Correct. So now you're actually sitting there, and if I'm saving all my images, maybe I've got 3 machines, but I'm saving all my images to a 4th machine. Mm-hmm. That 4th machine, you could put ShadowProtect on there. You don't have to license it, just because you only need the license to actually do the backups.
Right.
So by putting ShadowProtect on there, I now have that right-click menu, and I could do virtual boot or a quick mount if I need to recover a file.
Now, according to the documentation, I could also take the contents of the drive, the boot drive, and I could convert that also to a VHD or a VMDK as well.
Correct. We have an image conversion tool, so you could go out and take any point in time and say, okay, I'd like to actually create a VMDK from this, and then go ahead and do that VMDK conversion. We'll take everything from that image and put it into that VMDK or VHD file, and then you could use that in a virtual environment as the disk and bring up a new system. So
I'm just trying to think of how useful this could be, especially, I know a lot of guys and a lot of folks that watch our show, they love virtual machines. Love them. And I'm just trying to think of all the uses you could put this together for if you were doing like virtual labs and that kind of thing. I just see a tremendous amount of stuff that I could be doing with this using ShadowProtect Desktop.
Yeah. You could, anytime that you want to use a virtual machine, you could take a point in time, create that VMDK. It is a little bit slow because of the APIs that we're restricted by. So we can't get full access to some of the VMware and Hyper-V APIs. But you can go ahead and convert that image to a VMDK and then use it for testing. That's another, as I mentioned, a great thing for virtual boot. If you just want to test a server, what happens if I throw this software on this desktop? You could right-click, bring up a virtual machine, throw your software on, and see what that does.
I suppose that people could also, or may want to do that if they want to test, say, a service pack.
Yeah.
When it's released, rather than running it on a production server, I could then take get an image, do a virtual boot, apply the service pack to that, and see how it responds.
Exactly, and since it comes up originally as a NATed environment, you can still have the other server out there running, and it's not going to affect it.
Now, so let's talk about a little bit about the markets that you're looking for. When it comes to ShadowProtect Desktop, that's pretty much going to be home or business, either one.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And we know most people at home don't have a server, so the server edition then lends itself to the business environment.
Correct.
Okay. Well, how are we storing images? What's the most effective way you see out there to store images? Should we be looking at some type of SAN, or are they backing these up to tape? Or are they backing them up to disk? How are we doing that? Or what's the recommendations on that?
Yeah, really, disk is probably the best way. Tape's not going to get you the advantages of being able to do a lot of the right clicks. And so we see a lot of people backing those up either to a server or a NAS device. If you're backing up to a Linux-type NAS device, then you're not going to be able to put ShadowProtect on there and get that right-click menu. And one of our other products, which is called Image Manager, to help with consolidating images and keeping the image chain a little smaller. But you're not going to be able to get that right-click menu. So You can set up another server as a utility server, but also you could get a NAS device that's WSS with the Windows storage services, basically a Windows type NAS, and then you could go ahead and install ShadowProtect on that. And that's what we see a lot of people doing, using some NAS device out there, backing up all their servers to that NAS device. And then our image manager, as I mentioned, also allows you to replicate images across the internet to a disaster recovery site. And so a lot of people like that feature.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So is that a way for me then to store some images in the cloud? Is that,
yes,
that
exactly.
what you're saying? Okay.
So, I mean, with our snapshots going down to every 15 minutes, a lot of people may not run it that tight. It may be every 30 minutes.
Right.
But we'll take those. We'll do a full backup in the beginning, and then we'll do what's called a continuous incremental, and we'll just get those changes every 30 minutes, and you can specify, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 kind of a thing. And then those images, those little incrementals start to grow over time.
Yeah.
So Image Manager will consolidate those down into a daily image each day, and then at the end of the week, they'll consolidate those into a weekly image. And so your image chain is a lot shorter, but we'll also take those little incrementals if you want to and replicate those to a disaster recovery site. And so now they've got a disaster recovery site that's got all those images, and they could restore from there. In fact, I worked with a company to replicate those to their disaster recovery site. They were putting those on a server up there. Image Manager was consolidating them down, and then they also had ShadowProtect running so that they could right-click and do a virtual boot and come up with a server in a DR site across a VPN that people could still get to.
Well, I know that in your incrementals, because you're doing bit level backup.
Correct.
Okay. And I think this is important for the audience to understand. If you've got a file, let's say a 2 megabyte file, under the traditional way of backup, any changes to that file would trip a flag for your backup software to back that entire file back up again.
Exactly.
Okay.
Especially as we're getting into larger files now,
Yeah.
and database is being the worst offender. If I have a 10 gig database out there and somebody goes and makes a change to a couple records, that file's changed. Or new email may make the Exchange EDB file change. And so, yeah, file-based backup would pick that whole thing up again, whereas we would just pick up those slight changes at the disk level.
Exactly. Therefore, making the incrementals very small and very fast, relatively speaking.
Correct. Yeah, especially if you're only doing them every 30 minutes. And so that's where it makes it very simple to replicate this off to a DR site. Every 30 minutes, we'll do a snapshot, use VSS to make sure the database is in a clean state so that everything's pushed out to disk and there's no transactions in memory. And then once VSS has done that, we'll go ahead and take a snapshot, and then we can replicate those minor changes across the wire to a DR site.
Now, okay, so this DR site, is this something that StorageCraft operates, or is this a third-party site, or
it basically can be anything that you want it to be. We use an FTP client, so when you say that you want to replicate, you can replicate locally to a network device on that same network in the same building, or you could go across the internet to any FTP server. So you can set up whatever you want, either some third-party client. We have some customers that actually have services up in the cloud, some of our OEM partners, or you could just set up maybe one of your other sites. Site A could just replicate to Site B in some of the larger companies.
Are you guys going to do anything with like the Amazon S3 service, or?
Yeah, they could use Amazon S3, anything that will accept an FTP connection.
Okay. Do you guys intend on doing something on your own, or are you going to leave that to your OEM partners?
Not really. We'll let our OEM partners do that, and we like to leave it flexible so that people could use whatever they'd like to. One of the things we are coming up with is some new technology so that we're instead of just using a traditional FTP, we'll actually have some technology that'll make that many times faster, moving that across the wire. Now, they're very small, as we indicated already, but as you get into larger customers, we want to make sure that those stay small and efficient on their pipe and don't take up too much bandwidth.
All right. Fair enough. Another question I've got for you. I noticed a product called Granular Exchange Recovery.
Okay.
I'm just looking that over. If I want to just restore the contents of one mailbox, I could do that with this tool. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's kind of a neat tool. It sits on a workstation. You really wouldn't want it on your Exchange server anyway, because if that went down, you've kind of lost access to it. But sits on a workstation. It looks at any of those images that you've backed up, and from those images, you can go in and open those up and open the Exchange database basically in those that you've backed up, and go down through and find a mailbox that accidentally got deleted, find an email within a mailbox that got deleted, or even an attachment, and then you can just easily move that with a drag and drop over to your production server.
All right. Let's kind of focus now a little bit on ShadowProtect IT Edition.
Okay.
That product, why don't you just describe to our audience what that product does and who it's intended for?
Okay, just as the name implies, it's really meant for the IT guy, the IT person that's out there and has a lot going on in a data center. It's really a product that's not licensed on a per server basis. It's actually licensed to the person. And so if that's licensed to me, I now have that. It's a USB thumbstick, and basically allows me to plug that into any device. Let's say I'm going to do some sort of a service pack update, something like that tonight. I can plug in this USB thumbstick and do a quick backup of that server before I go ahead and do that service pack update. And the nice thing about that is it doesn't leave a footprint. You're not installing our agent down onto that. You're just running it from the USB thumbstick, doing a quick backup, or you can also do a quick restore. You can plug that in, boot off of it, and go into the recovery environment. So it gives you all the same functionality, but you don't have to install that on a per server basis. It's just whatever box you need to use it on, whether it's a desktop or a server. So it's great.
No, by all means,
for
go
IT
ahead.
guy to work on somebody's machine or server, whatever it might need to be.
Well, I think one of the interesting things about the IT edition is the way it's licensed.
Correct. Yeah. So you're not buying. So if I've got 100 servers or let's say 100 desktops and 5 servers in my environment, I don't have to buy 100 desktop editions and 5 server editions. This is actually just licensed to the IT guy. So there's one license, one thumbstick, and it's for that person. And then he can go around and take backups as needed, when needed, or do restores of backups that he's already taken.
And it's also a time-based subscription. It's more like a subscription, isn't it?
It is good for a certain period of time, like a year, and so that would have to be renewed every year, similar to some other products that are out there.
All right. Well, why don't we get ready to take a quick break, and when we come back, everybody, we'll have some more with Brett from StorageCraft to talk to us a little bit about what they do there. We'll be right back, so don't go away.
GFI Software provides a single source for networking, security, monitoring, and hosted IT solutions for small to medium enterprises. GFI's extensive suite of award-winning on-premise solutions includes anti-spam, email security, email archiving, endpoint antivirus, centrally managed backup, event log management, server-based faxing, network monitoring, removable device control, vulnerability scanning and patch management, and web filtering and security. GFI also offers a suite of hosted solutions including email security and continuity, frontline email defense, and monitoring and remote management. With award-winning technology, an aggressive pricing strategy, and a strong focus on the unique requirements of small to medium-sized enterprises, GFI Software can satisfy your needs on a global scale. Please visit us online at www.gfi.
And we're back with Brett Twiggs, Sales Manager for StorageCraft Software, the makers of ShadowProtect Desktop Server and IT Editions. We're having an interesting conversation this afternoon about storage, backup, bare metal recovery. I want to remind you, if you're watching on Justin.tv, come over to live.frugalbrothers.com. That is where the chat room that we moderate is located. I'm back after a brief hiatus of some bad illness, so bear with my voice. Ricola to the rescue, as they say. Ricola, as they say. Anyhow, we're back with Brett Twiggs. Brett, we were just talking about ShadowProtect IT Edition. Let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned your OEM business, okay? Can you give us any kind of details about what that consists of and what your partners are doing?
Yeah, we've got a few different partners out there. Some of them, Zenith Infotech, LabTech, kind of have a complete solution. We've also actually not just our OEM business. A big growing part of our business now is, which is kind of similar to the OEM space, is our MSP business, and so that's getting quite large. We're getting some large MSP partners in that too. But also we've got other people that just build products, kind of around and our products, so to speak. ShardTech, for example, builds a BDR device to kind of do kind of an appliance to do backups, hold all those images and some of those things, something to back up to. Mm-hmm. And so we're seeing all kinds of different people, whether they're building products around ours or kind of integrating our products. There's a lot going on in that space.
So your customers, do you tend to deal more with the small to mid-sized businesses? Are you going after enterprise, or is it pretty much fair game, or what's your marketing and sales strategy when it comes to that?
I would love to go after enterprise. That's kind of where I've always been. But no, right now our sweet spot is small to medium business. The small business, I think this is a great product for them. You know, I've mentioned Virtual Boot quite a few times.
You have.
That's a technology that blew me away when I first saw it. I was just, as an IT guy in the early days, I was just floored by the fact you could right-click, bring up a VM, and there's my server. I mean, what happened to the 6 hours and all the blood, sweat, and tears of trying to get this thing back up? And so I think that's a great enterprise-type technology for small businesses. And so, you know, with a hardware-independent restore, virtual boot, quick mount to restore somebody's file that they accidentally deleted, there's just some neat technologies. And we try and make those, again, as I mentioned, we focus, and the whole reason that StorageCraft came about was we had snapshot drivers, we could do backups, but we wanted to do something nobody else really did, and that's focus on recovery. Make it simple, easy, and really effective.
Okay, so let's talk about Small Business Server for just a minute, because you do have a product designed especially for Small Business Server. There's
Correct.
New versions of Small Business Server coming out. Part of the there's the Small Business Server Essential, which is part of the Colorado version of Windows Server. That'd be Windows Home Server, Windows Small Business Server Essential Edition. That's Colorado. So you will have an edition just for the Colorado servers, or will that work just as effectively on the standard version of Small Business Server?
Well, and that's where our product really doesn't differentiate too much from the different platforms.
Okay.
Desktop is pretty much the same product as Small Business Server, and that that's pretty much the same ShadowProtect product as on server. It really gets into the pricing as far as pricing for desktop, Small Business Server, or on full server. Small Business Server is just a great way to use our product because of the fact we already have all the VSS agents in there. So if you're running Active Directory or Exchange, some sort of a SQL database, all those things are included in that price. And so it makes it very simple for small business owners to be able to just know what they're getting into. No surprises down the road.
Right. But there's a lot of small businesses out there that do use Small Business Server.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
and if that goes down, they are totally out of business because it runs everything.
Exactly, and that's one of the reasons we want to make it simple to recover. I mean, hardware independent restore makes it to where they can come up in the recovery environment, and they don't have to worry about how do I really rebuild this. They don't have to spend the hours to find a contractor to come in. Try and make that as easy as possible for people.
So that would probably be more because I'm trying to think, you would probably be better off trying to do that as quickly as possible rather than try to virtual boot a Small Business Server, wouldn't you think?
Well, you could virtual boot a Small Business Server. It really depends on the where you're keeping those images, and what the resources are like, and again what you're running on your Small Business Server. If you had that thing loaded down and it was a file server and a database server and your email server, you just want to make sure you've got enough resources there to handle that. But they could. That's one of the things with a small business. They can't afford to be down, and so they could virtual boot, come up on that server that's holding all their images. They're kind of back up and running for the day, and now they've got a little bit of time, and they don't have to stress about actually getting the full server repaired and back up again.
Let's talk about the image management, because I could foresee that you've got to have a pretty strong tool to keep track of all the images that you might be generating from the desktops and your servers. So
Correct.
How is that managed effectively?
One of the things that we do in Image Manager is, and you can actually install, if I'm backing up to a server and all my images are going on to that, I can install Image Manager for free. When you get into replication and some other advanced features, kind of what we call enterprise features, you have to get a license for that. But two things that you can do with Image Manager for free. One is verification, where we'll go back and re-verify those images to make sure they're correct. Mm-hmm. Every time that we actually create an image, we create an MD5 hash for it. And then we'll go back and check that image and compare the MD5 hash values to make sure it hasn't changed. We also do consolidation for free. And so we want to make sure that we can roll those images up and keep that image chain much smaller. I mean, if you're doing 10 incrementals a day over 5 days a week, you're up to 40 a day, 200 a week, 800 a month. I mean, that just gets to the point where, you've got thousands of files over the year. And so we want to kind of consolidate those down into dailies, weeklies, and monthlies. So by the end of the year, we've consolidated that to where you have your full backup if you started at the beginning of the year, and then you've got 12 monthlies, and that's your image chain. And so all of that's free. And also when we do consolidation, we verify before we actually roll those into a consolidated file.
All right. Now, so if a company is looking, okay, and backup and recovery is huge business out there. And it's like job one for a lot of IT departments. Why would they choose StorageCraft? To kind of just sum it up.
I think one of the big things would be the fact that we've been around for a long time. Our backups are one of the best snapshot drivers out in the industry. So that's a proven snapshot driver, so you're getting a good backup. But more importantly, we've got the tools to make the recovery fast and easy. And that's where really the rubber hits the road. You don't want to have a recovery that's going to take you 4 hours. That's 4 hours of business and possible revenue that you've lost. You want to be able to get this thing up as quick and as fast as possible without all the headaches and without a rocket scientist needing to walk you through it.
Let's get. I think another question that comes to mind is, how has virtualization impacted your business, and how well does your product work with Hyper-V and vSphere?
That's been actually a good business for us. We're backing up now from a virtual standpoint. We're not backing up at the hypervisor level. We're actually backing up that guest OS. Okay. One of the advantages to that is, it's no different than backing up a physical server. Another advantage is the fact that you can move that to a physical server with our hardware independent restore. So that makes it really easy for people to move those around. So one of the things that we've had to do is kind of do some virtual pricing. As that's grown, we've had to try and make that a little bit easier for our customers and give them some good virtual pricing on that also. Okay.
And then can you get a little bit more detail about the bare metal recovery process?
Yeah.
And really explain to us how the nuts and bolts of that.
Transition too with, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Sorry. I didn't want to walk on your question.
Okay.
One of the things we have is kind of a transition thing here between these questions is Headstart Restore. Headstart Restore is part of Image Manager and allows you at a DR site or even the local site to take those little images and start putting those into a VMDK or a VHD file, so that if you have a huge 2 terabyte volume, that could take a while to lay all that data back down during the restore process. And with Headstart Restore, you can start putting all those into that VMDK or that VHD file, so that when the server goes down, you just have to kind of finalize it, put the last couple changes in there, and bring that thing up in a matter of minutes. And so that's made moving to that virtual environment very easy for some people. From a recovery standpoint, that's one of the reasons people use Headstart Restore, is those large servers where it can take forever to get them back up. It makes kind of that bare metal restore process a lot faster. But in general, our bare metal restore process, you can put in that IT edition thumbstick, or you can just pop in the CD that is also a bootable CD that comes with the product to install it. And that's our recovery environment. It'll boot up into the recovery environment. It'll ask if you want to load the network drivers, and you can say yes on that, and it'll go out and load basically the Windows PE environment. We suggest the Windows 2008 because it's going to have the latest drivers. And then once you're in that PE environment, you can go ahead and just say, I want to do, if it's the exact same box and you put new drives in it, you can just go ahead and tell it that you want to do a restore and pick the image file that you want to load from, and it'll go ahead and put that back down. If it's dissimilar hardware, you can go into the hardware independent restore wizard, and then it'll walk through and help find the drivers needed for that. And so we've got a lot of flexibility in there, but trying to make the restore console very easy and simple to use.
All right. So how can people trial this software? How can they go about trying it out for themselves?
If you go out to our website, there's a couple different places. You can go out and look at our products, and under whichever product you're interested in, there's a 30-day trial. That'll take you actually to another page, which is under our downloads page. And then it shows all of those right out there where you can download any of these products and actually back them up and run them for 30 days.
Okay. All right. And I guess one final question for you. You've been very gracious. We got off to kind of a rough start with the show today, but and what's the next big thing for you guys?
Probably the MSP channel. Our MSP partners are just growing like crazy. A lot of MSP people out there are seeing that this is a great product. It's easy to use. We're coming out with more tools all the time for our MSP partners. One of the things we just came out with is a new license console, so that as they actually have special pricing for the MSPs also, but they can go into their licenses that they're running for their customers, and if a customer A over here disappears and doesn't want to use them anymore, they can take those licenses back and then give them to somebody else right in their console, or they can just revoke those licenses and then they don't have to pay for them. So it makes it a lot easier than having to work through us on that licensing, and they can control their business a little bit better.
All right. Well, you know what, Brett? We really appreciate you coming on today's show.
My pleasure. Thanks, Bruce.
We always try to give our guests the last word before we sign off for the day. So have at it. Is there anything you'd like the audience to know before you take off?
I would say give it a try. This has got to be one of the easiest recoveries that I've ever dealt with in the industry.
There you go. StorageCraft, check it out at storagecraft.com, correct?
Correct.
You can also follow them on Twitter, at StorageCraft on Twitter. Brett, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come on and be a guest on our show.
My pleasure. Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you so much. Okay, everybody, remember, if it's in your shop not making any money or saving any money, get it out of there. We'll be back again on Sunday for Business Computing Weekly.